I'm meteorologist Jared Piepenburg here, and Minnesota's fishing opener is fast approaching. And when I first got started here, I saw this podcast studio, and I thought right away, I gotta talk walleye fishing and bass fishing with some people that know how to do that well here across the state, and just maybe give some ideas to anyone tackling opener. So today with me, I have Dan Eigen down here on the end, also known as Walleyedan, if you've heard that name before, and then Josh Douglas, sorry, who is actually a pro fisherman and on the bass series here. Yep. So yeah, which is pretty rare for Minnesota. There's only a couple of you guys.
Yeah, actually getting pretty popular real quick, because when I was coming up, there was really not many people doing it at all, and now there's 4, 5, or 6 of us running around. So it just goes to show you how good a fishing we got here in Minnesota.
Yeah. And Dan, do you want to tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Well, sure. So I am married, have 3 grown children. Mac, our son, is 21. Elizabeth is 23, born on the same day, May 15th.
Oh, wow.
Fishing opener weekend, typically.
Oh, of course.
And then Alex, our oldest, is 27. But yeah, 3 kids. I live up in the Brainerd Lakes area. I've been guiding for 35 years and just a passionate outdoorsman.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough in the past that my family's been out with you, and we had a heyday. We were talking about that before we started recording here, that the fishing that we had on that day was just, everything was aligning, I think. So.
Yep, and like I was telling you guys, it's like, and one of my customers is like, Dan, it's the rule of 7s. Every 7th trip is awesome. You know, and it's like all the others will fall all over the board. Some will suck and some will be mediocre, but it seems like it's kind of true. You know, it's just like, and we had one of those days where it's like no matter where we went, we just whacked them. Yeah,
it was a lot of fun, both walleye and bass. I prefer bass fishing, but when the walleye are biting, I mean, it can be a ton of fun. Josh, we have you on here too. You're also a guide for Mille Lacs Lake.
Yep.
Yeah, for smallies and largemouth. I was at one of your seminars, and I liked hearing about your stats. That was really fun to hear. Yeah, do you want to tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, just I do out-of-state trips only, so you do have to travel in, and that's nothing against fellow Minnesotans, or even I'm pretty strict about even following the border. But there's a lot of guides there before me, and you know, I just like to bring people in there, help the economy and all that, make it a big trip. But I do, you know, I guarantee 20-pound days. That's what I do on the water every day. Artificials only. So, you know, whether you catch 20 pounds in the first 8 hours or whether you catch 28 pounds in the first 8 hours. But if you're not there after 8, I mean, we're just going to stay out there until we get there. I think it's only been 3 times in 9 or 10 years that we haven't done it. So it's a really good fishery. So
yeah,
that is impressive. Holy cow.
Yeah, there's some big smallies.
Yeah.
Some largemouth in the mix, or
never. I've never caught one. I mean, I catch them. I fish the whole country, fishing different Bassmaster tournaments, stuff like that. Definitely chase largemouth locally, but I prefer the smaller lakes all around the house. I usually just pick a side of the lake that the wind's blowing less, and we just go over there and catch smallmouth.
Yeah. So both you guys have been fishing across Minnesota waters for many years. That's why I'm like, I thought it'd be great to have you on, and maybe just people that are tuned in here, just maybe help them break down water faster and just give them an idea of what to look for and how to approach this weekend coming up here. Because for some it's like a holiday, but you get out there and it almost can be a little overwhelmed, like, I didn't find them right away, you know, where should I go? So that's what I was hoping that we could do here with this, you know, give people an idea, anything from, you know, depths and what to look for weather-wise, and maybe we can go into some baits and stuff like that for this time of year. Yeah. My dad and I, we usually approach the weekend right away at midnight when it opens up. We're up trolling shallow for walleyes, and that's just what we've always done. And they're there, they're not some years, and it's just that's kind of fishing for itself, I guess. But I was just kind of wondering, have you guys ever done the midnight openers before, just like right away?
When I was a kid, I definitely did. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I've done them, you know, but yeah, it seems like that's for the younger, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're usually guiding opener
Yes.
morning, so
Yeah.
it's like if you're fishing at midnight, yeah, it's. But I've like I say, with the kids being born on May 15th, one of their birthdays, we were out at midnight, and I'll never forget it. And you know what? I think we caught a rock bass. It was one of those nights, but it was, they were laying on the deck of the boat with the sleeping bag, and the stars were out, and so, but yeah, typically, as a fishing guide, we're out at 7:30, and that's kind of
So those early risers. I mean, how would you tell someone to approach this year? It's with such a mild winter, and then the spring was so mild, but now we've had really active weather. It's been very rainy as well. Is there certain things that you would look for just going to that local lake, just right off the bat that comes to mind at all? Hey, Dan?
So do you want to? Am I talking walleyes and Josh is talking bass? Or what?
That's kind of what I was leaning toward.
I'm not talking walleyes.
So I'll start with that. And rain, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of rain,
Yeah.
and it looks like it's going to continue. So, Gull Lake is my home lake, and 95% of the time that's where I open up. And when you get a lot of rain and water movement, it's those neck down areas where you've got water moving, that's attracting the bait, and of course the walleyes are going to follow. The whole food chain begins.
Mm-hmm.
So my suggestion is, if you're fishing a lake that has a river coming into it, or creeks or streams, probably one of the best places to focus early, and it can be just crazy good. So yeah, that's but we're in the same boat as everybody else. It's like, just because we're fishing guides doesn't mean that we're magical and know exactly where they're at. So there comes that trial and error, and you need to cover water and try to find the aggressive fish, and so it's not automatic, but wind swept shorelines, if we have a couple or a few days of a strong south wind, that north shore is going to be a spot where you're going to want to look, because that's where the bait is going to be. And we look at it as that's pretty elementary stuff, but the listeners, it's just like, just little things like that can go a long ways.
A lot of times with that too, if that wind is still blowing, 2 or 3 days in a row, a lot of fishermen don't want to go over there into the wind, but that might be where the fish is at. So sometimes you have to play that game of like, I got to be uncomfortable if I might want to catch some fish, right?
And like Josh can tell you, with even bass, it's like, seems like the gnarlier the weather, the crappier the weather, the better the fishing. It is for walleyes for sure. But
one thing I was at your seminar at Shields, Josh, and I think one of the main things I took away from the spring is it sounded like a lot of the smallmouth fishing is just evolving around the temperature.
Yeah, but bass, for anything in the spring, really, largemouth, smallmouth, don't matter. It's going to be, that's the one time of the year that they are genetically programmed to be certain areas, because they want to spawn in the spring. And then with that also comes, same as us, if a day like today, the sun pops out and it wants to touch 60 degrees, we want to get out in the sun and feel that, because it makes us warmer. They're the same. So if we get them warm up days, they're going to kind of, your largemouth and stuff are going to pull out, and they're going to get in the sun more. And then those big temperament days, we get them clippers that kind of come down and push everything back towards winter, and those fish are going to bury up in the weeds. Another place that a lot of fishermen don't want to go is into the weeds, and that's where a lot of those bass like to live.
Yeah, and that can make things so tricky too.
Yeah.
Just like it's like almost like a mental game. Some of those days, like, you get out there and you don't get them in that first hour or two, and then it's like, all right, where do I go next, and how am I going to approach that? So those are all really good pointers. I thought, let's stay on this topic, but maybe talk about what do you fish with in these areas? You said like the water coming into areas like that. Are you casting stick baits? Are you recommending minnows or is it leeches this time of year for anyone that's like, goes to the bait shop and it's like, all right, I need a pound of this, or.
Well, yeah. And it's, even like, my dad brought me into this fishing world, right? And he's like, you can't be out on the water unless you got leeches, crawlers, and minnows, right?
Yeah. The big three.
The big three, exactly. But, of course, artificials have kind of come onto the scene strong, and But to answer your question, depth is a big thing, and the lakes up in our neck of the woods, with the introduction of zebra mussels, have just become crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in less than 20 feet of water and you're over the top of them, unless you have moving water, where it's mucked up a little bit, you're going to spook those fish. So, for the most part, yes, you're going to be casting away from the boat unless you're in a deep hole next to some of that, moving water. Then you could, live bait rig with a spot tail shiner or jig vertically, but anything less than 20, you're going to be wanting to cast away from the boat just because the fish are so darn spooky. But jigging a minnow, you can, cast a drop shot and a minnow, and just keep that rod tip there and just work it back slow until you feel a thunk. Give them just the rod tip and whack them. Yeah, so jigs and minnows, live bait rigs and minnows. Jigging wraps, even early season, work great. It's always been said that cold water, they don't work, but it's like
Well, they work great.
They work great under cold water conditions. Crankbaits, soft plastics. You need to have everything. And if you've got multiple people in the boat, have everybody try something different until you establish
That's a
a
really
pattern.
good idea.
So,
Yeah. Sometimes it seems like one person gets one on one and everyone instantly
Wants to
switch. Like,
Right.
well, they got that one fish right away. But so just kind of, it's always interesting what they want to bite on, I'm sure. And you guys notice it more than anyone else. You guys are on the water all the time.
Yeah. And one thing, along those lines, it's like leeches, right, have become the bait. Not have become, it has been for years, but it's like now with the clear lakes and the slip bobbers and having to get away from the boat, leeches, right? But leeches don't swim when the water is below a certain point. So if you put that leech in the water and it curls up, obviously switch baits, right? Because you need that thing moving, and I don't know what that magic temp is.
Oh, maybe, I just learned something right there myself.
Maybe
I
it's
have no idea.
Yeah, maybe
That's
it's
awesome.
60 or 55. I don't know, but you wanna make that bait has to look good. If you've got good bait, you're gonna have confidence, and when you have confidence, you're gonna catch them. So.
Have you noticed with walleyes this time of year any correlation for like depth and temperatures at all, like what the surface temperature of the water is? Have you found the walleyes and around opening fishing, like on the warm years, that they're at this depth, and those like late ice out years that's they're holding back more? Have you seen that correlation up in
I have.
around area?
Yeah, I have over the years, but it's kind of like I'd mentioned before. It's just like you need to really. I'm not out there days ahead of time, looking for these fish, and maybe I should be, right? Because there are people that are doing that, but there's. And I guess along those lines, I was up at the Pine River stripping station a couple weeks ago, and with the early ice out, we were all thinking, gosh, it's going to be the water temperature is going to be warm, the fishing is going to be unreal, but they were saying that everything is just about the same as it was last year and the year before. It's
That's
like,
really interesting.
It was for me too to hear that, but it's
because we set records down here in southern part of Minnesota for early ice out.
Yeah.
days, I was thinking the same
record
thing.
setting up north too. Yeah.
It was,
so-
yeah. But then then you get that rain and some of those cool days, and things ended up, I think, averaging out. And
Yeah, it's
So-
it has been a wild spring, especially coming off of such a mild winter.
Yeah.
Josh, I was going to ask, are you ever catching the walleyes when you're?
Yeah, all
I
the
was,
time.
I
Yeah,
was wondering that.
Mille
on
Lacs
Lacs.
is chock full of them. It's an awesome fishery, and sometimes them big walleyes hang right. They're already done spawning or getting done spawning. So the smallmouths are, when we hit opener, they're just going to be moving to the shallow reefs and stuff like that out there. So the walleyes are right there with them. You can see them. You can see the white dot on their tail and stuff when you're out looking for smallmouth. And it's a good time. The big walleyes like to roll with the big groups of smallmouths for a while in the spring. So you can just if you're talking lakes like Mille Lacs, you can definitely fish it. I like to use a reaction bait in the morning a little bit more, like a jerk bait or or a little paddle tail swim bait would be a really good choice. And just always remember, even if it doesn't get going in the morning, and this goes for, like, I grew up fishing Lake Minnetonka and the city lakes here. So just because they don't bite right away in the morning, they're not really supposed to this time of year. Generally, as the temps warm up and get going, the bite will get better in the afternoon and all that too. So
I grabbed your YouTube video here of you have the series like What's on My Deck.
Yep.
And I grabbed last year's, spring, basically open your May baits, and it's there's not too many that you have kind of a select few that
I usually do 9 for that series all the time, so there's always a few more I'm working on, or I just don't want to let the cat out of the bag. Yet. But chatterbait, a spinner bait, stuff like that's going to be really good around here, especially in the city. In those little bays and stuff where they're sliding in, you can find a lot of that good info. I do it by the month, so you can find.
Yeah, I went and looked through them. Of course, then I grabbed the one that made the most sense for right around now. Opening fishing. Yep. So that's always fun, and to see what everyone like. I've followed like some of the other pros. What's on my deck for this tournament, and I just think that's a really nice tool for people just wanting to see. Like how you did it. It's just like, well, this is the bait. I'm not going to tell you exactly where it was on the lake, but this is how
I'm just taking them.
Yeah, this worked really well for me. Those baits. When I was at your seminar, I heard marabou jigs.
Yeah, that's
too.
Great this time of year right now. Another good one for clear water, like you were saying, zebra mussel, clear water stuff. You catch walleyes, you'll catch a lot of smallmouths, but it'll even work around the city too.
Yeah, so I was up in Fargo, the past many years, and I was fishing the Detroit Lakes area, which is kind of similar. It's all crystal clear, deep lakes, and some of them have some smallmouth in it. And I know I did really, really well right around opener with the marabou jigs. Just it's so crazy. It's like nothing, and you just reel it in.
Yep. They got good eyes, though.
Yes, that's what you were talking about. Just the smallmouth's eyes, the way that that they're different than the largemouth. So you almost see it. Do you want to touch on that a little bit here for the weekend? Maybe someone is just saying like, "Hey, I'm going to this lake and it does have smallies in it." Yep. That they're a little different than
they are. Smallmouth and largemouth, both bass. I mean, obviously most people know largemouth have a bigger mouth, smallmouths have a little smaller, but the similarities kind of end there really. Smallmouths really like to school into bigger groups. Largemouths do a little bit, but because smallmouths have such good eyesight. So if you look at like the Great Lakes boom and for smallmouths, and even through here, it was the zebra mussels that were back in the 80s or whenever that was that came in, slowly cleared all the water. And it just made the smallmouth in particular boom because their eyes are like a pack of wolves. They can work together like a pack of wolves to get their prey and use their eyesight to their advantage. Largemouths have a lateral line. They can see, but they don't have the best eyesight in the entire world, so they use a lateral line. So a little bit more like a mountain lion. They're going to ambush their prey. They're going to hide in weeds under your boat dock, something like that, and ambush. So it's just something to be thinking. Smallmouths prefer sand and rock in clear water. Largemouths like vegetation and rocks, always good, stuff like that, but the shallow bays. But right now, in particular with opener coming, if you're up north in my neck of the woods chasing smallmouths on Mille Lacs, you're looking for the shallow reefs, the little bays that are going to warm up first. But they're going to be gamers. They're going to want to bite. They're feeding up after a long winter. They know the spawn's coming. And then largemouth, Lake Minnetonka, I'd be looking at the smaller lakes, the little ponds in there, the little north bays that are protected from those cooler, because it seems like looking at your weather forecast, every day it's 60, and then it's, especially up north, but it's all over the place. Every other day it's flipping. So that's going to change those fish a lot, but definitely it's a good time of year to go shallow and just go fishing. Yeah,
I was going to touch on that with the pattern is just like a roller coaster here with the temperatures. They go in the 60s for highs, and then we have like lower 50s with a rainy day. And then you look a few days later in the 70s. How do you guys approach that? Just, doesn't even have to be for opener, but just for the month of May, it can just be so wild for weather. Like each day it can be so different. Maybe to help someone to say like, if it is going to be a rainy weekend, this is kind of how I would approach it. If it's going to be that sunny, warm one, this is how I would tackle it for walleyes.
For walleyes, it's like cold fronts. It's always been said, smaller baits, lighter line, right? I mean, just go more finesse. And I guess, that's live bait, versus artificial bait, during cold front conditions, and probably a little bit deeper. But yeah, I mean, it's just you really have to, be out there. I mean, there's no substitute for time on the water. So it's like those of you, listeners that are going out, it's like, what, you can't expect to go out and pound them. I'm sure it's going to happen, but it's like you need to be on the water a lot to really, be able to follow them.
To be consistent.
To be consistent, absolutely. I mean, there's just no other way around it. But yeah, live bait, pretty hard to beat, even for those bass, Josh.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sure.
Have you had live bait in your boat before?
I've never actually used live bait for bass in my entire life.
Yeah.
Even our days when we'd run. Well, I just, from a young age, I knew I wanted to fish Bassmasters, and it's a rule. You can't use live bait. So I just was like, well, I better not learn how to do that now. And so I know I never have. I mean, I have before for walleyes on trips on charters and stuff on Mille Lacs or crappies early season. But no, I've never done it for. But I've been humbled by people that have around me before very easily. So.
I'm sure.
No
I've been up on some of those lakes up by Detroit Lakes, and walleye guys are going by with their spinning rigs and just like smallmouth after smallmouth.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm up shallow in the rocks and like, I can't go out there and do that because I don't have that bait,
Yeah. And with that being said, if you're still not around them, you're just not around them. You're not going to catch them anyway. But like he was saying with the leech, and that I learned something when a leech tights up. That means it's just like a crawdad prefers to hibernate almost in the wintertime. They're just not going to be out there doing jumping jacks. So I think people need to think about that when they are going fishing and you're throwing baits, especially. It was cool to hear it from the live bait perspective, because I just figured, you throw a live bait out, let it do its thing, and it gets eaten. But if it's not the right time for a leech to be swimming, the fish are going to know something's up with that. So it's the same when you're imparting action to your baits using artificial, whether that's a Ned rig or a tube or a spinner bait or anything, that you're trying to match the forage and what's going on around. If it's cold, like bluegills or fish aren't chasing stuff super hard. You got to go really slow and make them bite. Now, come July, their metabolisms are going and they're chasing down things a lot more. The bluegills are scattering more. The crawdads are swimming. Now you can kind of pick up your pace. So I think that's a big one I see when you just don't stay on the fish all the time, to know it's more about the mood of what they're trying to eat than it is the actual fish themselves.
So
Good point.
just to summarize here, what I'm taking away is that if we end up having a cooler weekend for opener, slow down your baits and maybe go a little bit deeper too.
I would say for sure. And one thing I was thinking there too, using minnows, it's like when those fish are in those negative moods, just like Josh said, slow it down. But tail hooking a minnow can be just deadly, and once again, in that deeper water, if they're in 20 or deeper, just a live bait rig, tail hooked, spot tail shiner or red tail or creek chub, and you actually feel that minnow just, that vibration right before the thunk, because it's a scared minnow. And it's just that shake, is just like telling you that there is something with teeth looking at it, and it's just a great feeling.
That's what I'm trying to mimic all the time. With my rod.
Yeah.
Well, if you are just tuning in here, I have Josh Douglas with me right next to me, a pro bass fisherman and Mille Lacs guide for smallmouth.
Yep.
He has caught largemouth there.
Oh, I'll take people largemouth fishing too, but not a lot of people. Mille Lacs is a really good lake.
Oh my gosh, it's so good for smallies. And then Dan Eigen, also known as Walleyedan, is joining me here today. So we were talking about ideas how to approach opening fishing weekend, just any changes with weather and what baits, and how to break down some water maybe in your area. So that's where I thought we'd kind of continue. I thought we would talk a little bit about maybe using your graphs. If I thought we could touch maybe a little on forward-facing sonar, but I would say the majority of people probably don't have it. So maybe we just kind of stick to like, hey, you're showing up to your lake and you just kind of see it like a basic lake map. Is tight contours this time of year, something like that, or where a point meets certain areas? Or something that you would look for? Let's just say you went to a brand new lake for opening fishing, and you had that lake map. Is there something you might just look for there?
I guess for the walleye side of it, I'm looking to that north end of that lake, which typically would warm up faster than the rest of the lake, sees more sun, and then those big shallow flats are going to be spots where those fish are going to be, or it could be a point, but that ideal scenario would be, you've got a wind blowing south and you've got water pushing out, so it just locks them, locks the bait in there, which is just a real perfect combination. But points, inside turns, little funnels, it's kind of like, like hunting, right? It's the deer hunter that is picking out these, funneled spots and points where, the deer have to get from this point to this point. Fish are very similar. But it's just, and as far as electronics, it's like, once again, clear lakes, right? Back in the day on Gull Lake, we could sit over the top of fish in 12 and 14 feet of water and catch them, right? With a little chop blowing, because the water was more stained. Okay, now even with a chop in 12, 14 feet of water, those fish are gone. So you're not going to mark them. They're not there. They're scared. So once again, you're casting away from the boat. And that's where some of these electronics come in handy to be able to say, okay, there they are. And like you say, not everybody can afford that. And it's a controversial topic, that everybody has an opinion on. And, that could be a whole new podcast or a different podcast. But
it really could. It's very unique. I've been out, Tom Wynn, who's a pro walleye guy up in Fargo, he brought me out, and that was my first time watching someone use that. And we went out and fished walleyes, and I was just blown away of watching someone break down some water with that and hunt down fish. It changes things for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. We didn't catch very many. And I was out with a world premiere pro walleye fisherman.
Absolutely.
So it can be tough, but I mean, breaking down water with that is very unique. To just be able to go find that. And some of it ended up being just schools of little tiny smallmouth like this big that we found too. Is just like, oh, that's what we were looking at. But I think a lot of people may have side imaging on their graphs. I feel like that's pretty standard here with a lot of people that have been, getting a new graph, in the past 5 to however many years. How would you go about kind of explaining that? A lot of times you almost need to watch a video on it, but breaking down some.
Both of us do, and you can definitely check out my, it gets very specific electronics, which you can check out our YouTube pages and stuff to see in depth how you do that. But you nailed it with the map. Unless you're physically fishing the bank, like the bank of the lake, you're guessing on anything that's behind you, completely guessing what's out there. So you need a map. It breathes life into my electronics units, and I run all 3 major brands: Garmin, Lowrance, and Humminbird, because I need to for what I do and how I do it. Side imaging is really nice because you can use that mapping to first sit there the night before and decide where do you want to fish. Now that can be off of just, my fishy mind, I think this is where they're going to be. It can also be on a lake like Mille Lacs for the safety of your life, of picking a spot that's going to, weather-wise, is going to set up. Once you do that, now you kind of have an area and you know the contours up to 1 foot. You know how they change. And even though Mille Lacs is a glacial anomaly of a lake anyway, so you can't do everything quite perfect, the glaciers kind of really did a number on it. And that's what's so intriguing about side imaging is then you can get in those areas you like, flick on your side imaging, and just go through. And basically, it's 2 flashlights in a dark room, right? You're just lighting up everything you're seeing left to right. And you're mostly looking, you can see some fish and stuff, but you're mostly looking for habitat, fish holding habitat, something different, stop signs. And with glacial lakes, and this whole Minnesota area was made by glaciers, there's just random stuff in random areas, and it helps you find that stuff. And the cool thing is once you find it and you put a waypoint on it, It's yours and whoever else found it or whoever else you choose to bring to it. You know, like that's kind of your little area. So I think you know, with and even with the forward sonar, fishing's what you want it to be. Okay, if you want to just go fish on the weekend and never stare at a screen because we look at them all day long at work, go do that. But if you want to fish against the top 100 in the world, you might need to figure out how to better use the technology that's available to us today. So that's what it's out there for. But again, you know, it's every one of my videos, I can catch bass after bass after bass. It'll get 2,000 views. I can do an electronics one. It'll get 15,000 views. So people are hungry for it. They want to know. But just understand that if you do have the money and the desire to want to purchase the electronics, you're just getting started there because you don't just turn them on and fish in your boat. Then you got to even forward sonar is even harder because you got to learn how to maneuver your boat with what you're doing and have 2 or 3 more things going at the same time. It becomes very difficult. People think it's just going to be easy, and they just find themselves doing circles all day when they didn't even really want to idle in the first place. They just wanted to fish. So with that, but still, side imaging is a tool that most fishermen who have boats now should be consider utilizing. It comes pretty standard in most every unit now to buy.
Yeah, I know when I first got it, I was just like, idled all around. It was so neat to just go look at everything. Like, oh man, I had no idea there was like 7 rocks in that clump of weeds. You know, you find those really unique things like that if you have the time to go do that.
But sorry to interrupt, but when you get bit, it starts making sense. You're not just guessing anymore. And that's what part of fishing drives me crazy is guesswork. I like to know why I got that bite, and that's how I get paid. I got to go get them bites again. You know? And then weather-wise, they're wet already. So if it's going to rain, you got to go. As long as the storms are dangerous.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, and it's, you know, you looking back to the underwater camera, everybody was like, you know, gosh, this is going to change things. It should be outlawed. It's like, bottom line is, you know, it educated us and, you know, just made us better anglers. But the fish aren't going to just jump in your boat because you have an underwater camera. And same is the case with forward-facing sonar or side imaging. It's like, once again, you need to be on the water a lot to learn that stuff. And yeah, YouTube is going to help some, but it's like, bottom line is you got to be out there, and it's time. Exactly. So
if I could on that, I love the camera comment because I learned how to use side imaging on Lake Minnetonka. Me and my team partner would go around under a big black blanket because you couldn't even barely see the screens then in the sun.
Yeah.
And just everything we saw on side imaging, we didn't know what it was. We dropped them cameras down there and go, oh, that's that. So I could start telling, you know, what was different vegetation, what was rock, what was different fish, how big those fish were.
Yep.
And now that I have even forward sonar, I found myself going back to the AquaView now, playing that same game. What is this that I'm looking at? Why aren't they reacting to my bait?
Is it a bunch of suckers?
I've had that many times where the AquaView showed me, you know. So it's, again, they're just tools, but the biggest thing is it's about if fishing is more than just a little hobby for you, which is fine, everyone would do that. But if it's something you really enjoy doing, you want to spend more time doing it like yourself. Education is educating yourself on the water is only going to make you a better fisherman in the long run.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
I've had so much fun just like when I need that little break and have a bite to eat, and then it's like, all right, I'm just gonna go here and just watch the side imaging along this bank, you know, and see what's going on and what you can come across.
It's like me walking turkey trails the last week. What's down this path? What's down this path?
Just another.
That's how I live my life.
Oh boy.
What's over here?
You guys talked a lot about this time of year and kind of the north end of the lakes. I'm guessing you guys have noticed that a lot over the years, that just that north side of the lake. Would you think that would be down in, you know, central Minnesota and down in the southern Minnesota too?
The whole entire country. The north side of the lake is because it's protected. It goes more into your realm. It's protected from, one, it gets a lot of the sunshine, and 2, it's protected from the north winds that are usually bring cold weather in. So that's just going to be the first place that those fish want to spawn. The lake is going to start there, and then it's going to turn summer there the quickest too. So on a place like Mille Lacs, that north shore, and then lastly almost to 4th of July, now the middle of the lake's finally catching up to where the north lake was, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you can duplicate that all across the country, let alone the Twin Cities area.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight that again. I think just some people, just going like, well, I caught a walleye in this spot 3 years ago. I'm going to go right back out to that. And I've heard that called like fishing memories. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've done that so many times.
Yeah,
I'm like,
everybody has.
The worst thing in our tackle box.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm like,
that's so true.
Yeah.
But it's like you also have to look at, okay, these walleyes, where did they spawn, right? Mm-hmm. And if they all spawned up a particular river and that's over on, X side of the lake, it's like you need to go there because they're not just going to come out of there and just immediately all be up on the north end, so it's there's so much, but yeah,
there's so many
kinda have that
factors,
thought.
and the weather's driving so many parts of that
For
too,
sure.
from the wind and the temperatures and cloud conditions and how much rain that we've had. You talked about a little bit about just like that perfect setup, just like can lock them in place,
Right.
with the right wind. And I just feel like that's, maybe that's that 1 in 7, years.
Right. It
could almost
can be the case, where, the water movement is pushing out and you got that east wind, I'm thinking of a particular lake, but,
I can tell.
but it's just like, yeah, the fish are there and it's just like, but then, you catch a fish or two and everybody else is there too. And those fish were going to scatter. But yeah, I've had it spring, fall, where it's just like you've had those days where it's just that perfect storm, we'll say, current going this way, wind going this way. And it's like, yeah, it's just awesome.
We only just barely touched on largemouth, and I thought, a lot of these like small local lakes, that are like 500 acres and less are going to be full of, small or of largemouth or just a ton of them. How would you recommend someone to approach those like this time of year for opening fishing, where it's all catch and release? If anyone wondering, like, what are you doing fishing for bass?
What? Which is a relative new rule.
Yes, it
Relatively
is.
new. Yep.
But it's been a great one to be able to do.
Yes.
So it's like
Keep
most
going
bass
in that
fishermen don't want to keep them anyway. So it's been a really, really nice thing. But maybe just kind of talk about those small lakes. If someone's like, you know what, I did some walleye fishing this morning, I want to go chase after some largies this afternoon.
Which would be a great call, start in the morning on walleyes and stuff like that. And then as the back bays, those you really want to stay shallow this time of year, and I mean, under 10 foot up to a foot, you want to be in that range. And as the day gets warmer, those fish are going to, because that's going to be the water that gets the warmest. It's going to be a foot or two with the, where the lily pads want to grow, but they're not quite there yet. All that, it'll generally have sand or like a black dirt bottom, so it'll heat up quicker, just like if we wore a dark shirt in the sun. So that's going to attract those fish, or any hard targets. If there's like a piece of wood or docks, stuff like that, those are all going to be real good in the water because they're just going to be a degree or two warmer for them fish to get themselves against and warm up. So that, you want to stay in that shallow vicinity, and that can be all the little lakes, around the Twin Cities all the way up to northern Minnesota. They're all, and even take Lake Minnetonka is really a bunch of little lakes that they've connected via canals and stuff. So every one of those lakes are actually completely different than the other one, where you can just be in this lake on the east side where it's crystal clear and vegetation grows to 20 feet and all that, and then you go through a couple canals and you're still in the same lake, but now it's dirty water and the weeds only go up to 8 feet and stuff. So that changes absolutely everything for you. But as a general rule, right now, this opener, which is one reason why the fishing community fought so hard to get them to back that up to catch and release, because it's just a fabulous time to be out on the water chasing them around, definitely.
Can I? Yeah. So, to that, it's like, okay, so largemouth, right? They're up spawning, we'll say, right?
We're getting ready to.
Getting close to. But now you're fishing them during the spawn. Is there any, we'll say, downfall to that, or are they still gonna? I mean, are you interrupting them?
Man, I don't know. I mean, we do it for bluegills, crappies,
crappies, everything.
The general
True.
rule, everything's. It's more starting off the spawn. Once their bass don't spawn like a walleye, as you know. Walleye's a broadcast spawner, so they get up and they let it all do their deal. Where bass protect a nest, they'll make a nest, the male will, and then the female will move in. That gets pretty particular, and that's a whole nother way to actually go and fish them. But like right now at opener, if you're just out throwing around a spinnerbait and a chatterbait, and so you are not. Those are just pre-spawners. They're just moving in that want to eat, males and females, and it's just a good time because what you're doing is you're just going to put a lot of fish into certain areas of the lake.
Yep.
And so when that happens, then you have a competition factor. And it can be walleyes, perch, smallmouth, largemouth. They're all moving
Pike,
in.
everything.
It just makes competition, which makes your then your line getting tugged on a little bit.
Yeah. I thought about touching on like pike, but I'm like, I feel like whatever you throw, if they're around, they're probably going to bite.
Yeah.
Hey, when I was, you know what, growing up in Minnesota, I was all about the toothy critters until I caught a smallmouth and a largemouth. And I was like, okay, I'm done with that. I want to grab them by their mouth and get it done. But
yeah. Dan, I talked to Josh a little bit about what's on his deck. Do you mind sharing a little bit?
Not at all. Yeah. So what's on my deck, huh? As far as baits that I'm going to be using?
Yeah, you know, you said like a lot of times you throw a few different things to just figure out what they're biting. How do you approach opener?
So I'm going to have, whether it's a live bait rig, Lindy rig, or drop shot kind of a setup for minnows, and a little bigger hook, of course, with the minnow. And then be willing to or ready to switch that hook out to a size 8 or 10 or something smaller for a night crawler or a leech potentially. A jig and a minnow, different weights. Probably a 1/4 ounce is pretty standard. With a fat head or a rainbow or spot tail shiner. Sometimes I'll put a stinger hook on, and run that back, as far as I can go on that minnow without it, distorting the minnow. So, and then, of course, I've always got a reaction bait, they call them these days, I guess, the jig and wrap, right? That was designed for ice fishing is now one of the most, if not the most popular walleye bait. But I'm going to be casting those. And then I'll have probably a some kind of a paddle tail plastic, but yeah, just slip bobbers are kind of our staple all season long. But opener, it's probably going to be too cold, and I don't know what the leech supply is going to look like, but if we all of a sudden get some nice warm weather and those leeches are good and they're swimming, they're deadly. So
it's good to know. I touched on the marabou jig a little bit, but for Mille Lacs or, maybe in like the smaller lakes for largemouth, do you have, five baits that you're just have these and you will get bass if they're around?
Let's talk smallmouth, and this will work on any lake around here that's got smallmouth in there, but you want that marabou jig. I'm using the Outcast tackle ones, but they're actually kind of hard to find because it's marabou, so that's why I say that one. Otherwise, a Ned head. I'm actually make one. There's the Josh Douglas Perfect Ned head, and it's meant to come up all the time. But, man, you can catch. Sometimes on smallmouth, I catch 60 a day on the same one, the same plot. Everything just going. So there's that one, and then a little paddle tail. So fish eat fish. That's what I say all the time. So a little paddle tail is always going to be good. Those are a tube. Looks like crawdads. Crawdads mainly, smallmouth mainly eat crawdads. It's the biggest part of their diet is crawdads. And then a popper, just like a little topwater bait because everybody loves that. Largemouth around here, definitely you'd want like a skirted jig, something that you can pitch around boat docks, on laydowns where there's a tree in the water. A spinnerbait and a chatterbait, a bladed jig. Those are going to be, right now, those are going to be two really big ones. And then a Cinco, just a regular 5-inch Cinco catch. It's probably one of the more deadlier baits that you can ever just throw around here in Minnesota because we got a lot of bluegills, and I would say the largemouth, we don't have shad, which you see everywhere else in the country but here. And the largemouth, I think, eat a lot of crawdads and a lot of bluegills are their kind of main deal. So trying to mimic that. And then a topwater frog is always, and I can hook people on, if you just get yourself a setup with braided, put like Power Pro braid, something heavy, like 65 pound. I know there ain't no bass weighs 65 pounds, but the lily pads you'll bring in with them do. And then just a topwater weedless frog. And if you've never been a bass fisherman before and you throw that enough, I
gosh.
promise you will become.
So good.
For sure. But are you fishing that opener weekend too?
Yeah, maybe still, or maybe a buzz bait
Depends
or
on-
something. I'm still,
Still
up
fishing
north
top,
is going to
huh?
be a lot different than here in the city, where we're still a good bit behind.
True,
Heck, I
true.
look at the turkey woods up there, and you're better off in duck camo right now than you are. You come down here and everything's green, so
Exactly.
they're going to be a lot more. You're going to be waters gonna be
Couple
in the
weeks ahead,
50s
yeah.
and stuff like that, and
Okay.
more pushing. Where you can just get one of those bigger fish that are thinking or coming in or out of the spawn, because they do it quick here. Everything happens fast in
Oh, yeah.
Minnesota. Like even we said, you take this last winter, we didn't have no snow, and I don't know what you remember about the winter before that.
yeah.
We broke every record we had up north, but like every year, everything just happens at the same time because it has to happen so fast. Our weather changes so quick. So basically, all the fish are going to go up and get shallow all at the same time.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. We're helping break this down. Hopefully, everyone that's listening in or watching can take away something here today that maybe help them have a better game plan or just help them figure out how they want to approach opening weekend, and maybe they'll get bit.
Yeah,
Heck yeah.
definitely.
I would just ask, how do people find you, Dan?
Walleyedan.com, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Yeah, just Google Walleyedan. You'll find us. Or 218-839-5598, and you'll talk to the boss, Shelly.
I was gonna say with the wife.
Yeah.
I'm joshdouglasfishing.com would be my website if you're looking like any guiding information. And then, of course, I keep a pretty heavy Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and all that's just at Josh Douglas Fishing.
And you guys are gonna have a really busy weekend working.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Busy summer working.
Yes, for sure.
Yep.
It's great to hear. Thanks for coming down here and doing this.
Thanks
Yeah,
for having
it's
us.
my pleasure. Yeah,
It's been really
thank
fun to kind of talk about this, and any time to talk about fishing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Thanks,
was fun.
guys. And thanks for tuning in here. Best of luck on Minnesota's fishing opener, which is fast approaching.